Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Urban Update. I'm Byron Barnett. How does social, emotional, and spiritual intelligence affect negotiation outcomes? Is IQ a sufficient predictor of success in negotiations? Can multiple intelligence theory provide strategic insight into the processes of negotiation? These questions and many more will be addressed at the 2011 Negotiation and Leadership Conference, which will take place at the Joseph Martin Conference Center, 77 Louis Pasteur Avenue in Boston on Saturday, April 16th. Joining me this morning to explore these issues further are Mark Baio. He's a serial technology entrepreneur. He has started 10 companies in 5 years and is being hailed as the next Mark Zuckerberg by various technology magazines. He's a founder, 3words.me, a viral social application he recently sold as an acquisition. He is also the CEO of Avicora, a network connecting people and devices for open data communication. Also with us this morning, Andre Bisasor. He's a graduate student at Harvard's Division of Continuing Education and is the conference chair for the 2011 Harvard Negotiation Leadership Conference. Welcome to Urban Update, gentlemen. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Andre, let me start with you, I guess, since you're the co-chair of the conference here, one of the founders of this conference. Talk to me about the message that you're trying to get through on social, emotional, and spiritual intelligence, and how that affects negotiations. What is it you're trying, the message you're trying to get out to people, and some of the things that you're trying to explore?
Well, thank you, Brian. What we're trying to do with this conference is look at the different ways in which other types of skill sets other than just IQ and reason can affect negotiations. There are many things that impact outcomes of negotiation, such as emotional intelligence, the ability to be able to assess someone's emotional state to determine whether or not the negotiation even needs to proceed. Spiritual intelligence looks at some of the larger issues of meaning and purpose, whether or not this is the right type of deal, whether or not the values and ethics that we represent either as an individual or as an organization is really reflected in this type of negotiation setting.
Well, why is this something that deserves attention in your view?
I think it deserves attention because many times we find that the nonverbal, the intangible, the things that go beyond just what's in front of you are missed, especially by leaders. We've seen with the work of Howard Gardner at Harvard University on the multiple intelligence theory that there are actually other types of intelligences that matter in life. We've also seen with Dan Goleman's book on emotional intelligence that emotional intelligence is actually one of the key leadership skills needed in the 21st century. And one of the things we wanted to do in this conference is really tie those concepts and apply it to negotiation to increase performance in those arenas.
Mark Baio, I guess you're what they call, for lack of a better word, a social media expert. Talk to me about, I guess, how that sort of plays in the whole social media, Facebook, Twitter, everything else. How is that affecting the way we negotiate and how people interact with each other?
Well, interactions with social media are widespread. So instead of interacting over email, over text message, or over any other kind of one-on-one communication, social media communication is one-to-many and also many-to-one because you are receiving all these messages and you're broadcasting all these messages. So in essence, with such a platform that's recently been developed, we kind of get a sense of what other people are thinking in a mass capacity.
And what impact do you think that has on negotiations?
Well, I think with that mass capacity kind of knowledge, you can get a better sentiment of what people are thinking. I mean, with the emotional intelligence, social intelligence that is part of this whole I guess kind of mindset, you can get better data input from that than other sources.
Andre Bisasor, I guess when we talk about negotiations, are we talking about just daily one-to-one negotiations, on a sort of a micro level? Are you talking about big, huge, important negotiations, country to country? What do you mean when you talk about how all this affects negotiations?
Well, we actually believe that it applies across the board. We believe that, for example, on a global basis, we see this applied to mergers and acquisitions. There's a statistic that says a large percentage of M&As actually fail within the first few years. And in many cases, it's because of the people problems that are associated with bringing two companies together. And I think that sometimes the social intelligence piece that could be missed in a cultural audit has an impact on those type of global negotiations. And in everyday interactions as well, in terms of team selection, in terms of hiring an employee, being able to read some of the nonverbal cues, being able to go with instinct or intuition, because sometimes people present the best sort of foot forward. Your ability to bring this into a decision-making matrix actually improves performance over time.
Okay, we're going to take a little pause there. When Urban Update returns, I have more conversation about this year's Negotiation and Leadership Conference. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Does one's identity play a role in negotiations? How do social and emotional perceptions and realities regarding gender, race, religion, culture, and age influence negotiation process and outcomes? Do we overcome judgment, bias, and decision-making for situations of extreme pressure and high stakes? Thanks for joining us. We're back talking about the big Negotiation and Leadership Conference in Boston coming up here in April. Andre Bisasor. We've been talking about social and emotional and spiritual intelligence. What exactly is that?
Well, Byron, the definition of social intelligence really relates to interpersonal intelligence. It really looks at the ability to perceive, to sort of look at interactions between people or in an organization and being able to read or assess those dynamics for the benefit of either advancing one's cause or being able to negotiate better outcomes. It really has to do with situational savvy, and a corollary would be sort of like a politically savvy sort of skill set. So social intelligence really talks about that ability to look at people dynamics on a broad scale. Emotional intelligence more focuses on an individual level, being able to assess not only others' emotional states in the process of negotiations, but also your own emotional state and being able to not overreact or to react in a wrong way to any particular incident within a negotiation situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mark Baio, again, our social media expert here, I guess with the rise of technology, do you sense that students, how is that affecting the way students, I shouldn't say just students, but students are a little more savvy with technology than everyone else, but how is it affecting the way people interact? I think I heard a report the other day that talking on the phone is declining as people, text more and get into the social media more. What's happening to us as a society in terms of how we interact with each other?
I think we interact with more people, but on a on a more shallow scale. So we interact with an increased amount of people, and we get information from more people, but the emotional capacity that we communicate them with, such as where one-on-one in person is high in that, whereas texting is less, is diminished. So we talk to more people, we have less interactions with each.
And what do we think that does? What is that doing to us as a society? Is that making us? Is it bringing us closer? Is it pushing us farther apart?
Actually, I think that social media is playing a role, I think, in actually restoring the human factor to the technology space. In the way in which, for example, with social media, you have to sort of be a part of a network with other people who know you. In many cases, it involves pictures and video in which you can sort of share connectivity with people at a different level, but on a multiple scale. So I think social media is actually restoring that humanity factor. It's interesting as well that social media, I think, is playing a role also in business negotiations. If you look at, for example, the venture capital space, they're actually employing new principles called traction and social proof. This is where an entrepreneur has to sort of demonstrate the viability of their product or service by showing that there's a community that's actually liking or somewhat attracted or saying favorable things about that product or service. And so traction and social proof has a relationship with the social media space as well, and that's revolutionizing how venture capital work and negotiations are being conducted today.
Mark Baio, do you think that, honing one's skills in social media is something that's necessary in modern society? I mean, in terms of, could a person sort of fall behind socially if you're not, savvy to all the social media networks and things that you have to do, negotiating the internet? I
don't think social media itself has become such a replacement for interaction that it has to be that it's necessary. But in a business capacity, in a professional capacity, versus general people, just general interaction. I think it's very important to know about social media.
How do you feel that both of you, how do you feel social, emotional, and spiritual intelligence really affects how does that have an impact on a negotiation?
Well, let's take one example. You talked about earlier about how most mergers, acquisitions, M&As don't really work out. And what's really behind those M&As not working out is that their teams don't really work together well enough. Their leadership structure doesn't really work out. And what's really what's at the basic level of that problem is a social disconnect. If we do have social intelligence, we can see if a company does work well with another company. If it doesn't, that's probably going to not be a good idea. That's one of the examples of social intelligence that we can apply.
When you talk about mergers and acquisitions, are you saying that I guess normally a person, if you're trying to put a big business deal together, you're looking at the numbers, all the facts, issues, but you're saying that people should be looking at more than just the numbers and the product, that you have to look across at the person you're talking to, and is that what you're saying?
Yes, looking across the table at the person that you're talking to, but also from a social intelligence standpoint, being able to assess the culture of an organization and being able to do an audit, actually, of whether or not the dynamics culturally that are at play with the people in one organization really fit and match with the other organization. And many times, if they're incompatible cultures, if they're incompatible people dynamics, no matter what the numbers say, that merger is destined for failure.
Okay, we're going to take another pause here and come back. Stay tuned for more on the 2011 Negotiation and Leadership Conference, which again will take place in Boston at the Joseph Martin Conference Center, 77 Louis Pasteur Avenue on Saturday, April 16th. Stay with us, we'll be right back. What lessons in negotiation can be learned from young, successful entrepreneurs or from business leaders' perspective is very, very different from past generations. Today's leaders and entrepreneurs are learning how to overcome any bias that might arise because of diversity issues during negotiations. Back here with our guests, Mark Baio and Andre Bisasor. Can you give me an example, gentlemen, of when you talk about social and emotional intelligence, how that would affect, say a business deal? An example, how would it affect a business deal? Maybe help the business deal, or a business deal that perhaps fell apart because the parties weren't socially or emotionally intelligent.
Well, we can take social first. I mean, if you have a bigger company acquiring a smaller company, that's something that happens very often now because you have smaller companies with very new technology. So bigger company with a very traditional social structure, very traditional culture, and trying to integrate with a smaller company with a very progressive culture, very progressive meritocracy culture. That's going to create problems with them from the start. That's where social intelligence can come in. With emotional intelligence, if you have a negotiation, and you can try to infer the emotions of the other party. If they're unsure about something, if they display emotions of being unsure about something, but they don't really speak up about it, that's going to create tension in the future that isn't going to be addressed until the deal might fall apart.
So it sounds like you're saying in negotiations you need to look at things other than just the simple facts.
Exactly. Other than the numbers, other than what's said on the legalese, you got to look past that to the social, emotional, and spiritual intelligence.
I would say also two things on that. If you actually apply that to international business deals, you'll see that in many cases when companies are coming together, this sort of neglect of understanding the other culture, in not just company culture, but actual national culture. For example, the Chinese negotiates very differently from the Americans, and the Latin Americans negotiate in a different way than, say, those from the Middle East. So,
how so? Can you give us an example?
Well, for example, the Chinese, it takes a lot longer in their process of negotiation. The Americans they tend to want to be able to do a deal within a week, whereas the Chinese will more likely want to take 6 months. And so there's a fundamental difference in methodology and worldview that's at stake in terms of the different cultures there. The other point I want to make too is that as far as social media and social intelligence goes, corporations today are realizing that they're losing control of their brand. All it takes is maybe one or two people in a social media space to make negative comments about your product or service, and then you'll find that you're losing the definition of the brand that you have for your service or product. And as corporations develop more savvy in being able to negotiate with their customers within the social media space, understanding the technology, understanding that there's more to the equation than just simply traditional marketing methods. This will become more and more important as we go forward in the 21st century.
Any companies come to mind that are particularly good at this or particularly bad at it, who've perhaps either made mistakes, or companies that are good at this in terms of promoting their brand, through the social media?
I think there's companies that are actually more traditional companies like Comcast that are trying to build their brand up, try to offer more direct connections to the company on Twitter. That's one of them companies.
No,
I know that, for example, as well, that McKinsey, Starbucks, Nokia, Merck, I know a number of these larger companies as well are looking at not only how to utilize social media specifically, but they actually have very sophisticated programs now in how to apply social, emotional, and spiritual intelligence in these different settings.
If you want to talk about companies, talk about also Obama as well.
I was going to say an individual.
Exactly.
Well, he's an individual. I guess you could say the president is a company as well. We've been talking about companies, but I mean, does this have an impact can this have an impact on an individual like Obama?
Absolutely. I mean, you know more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been evident that the outcome of the 2008 presidency was largely affected because the Obama campaign was able to mobilize social media in an unprecedented way. And what really was happening was that he was using social media to negotiate with the public, to negotiate with the electorate. And in a very savvy way, he was able to take advantage of that technology and that medium to be able to advance his cause.
You know, everything we've heard about the social media, we've been reading about it in the last couple of years. Mark Zuckerberg is, Facebook is the third largest country in the world, and over a 500 million people at this point. Is social media sort of going to be swallow up the internet? Is that where people are going to be going? Is that really the future of people in terms of their communication?
I still think social media is going to still be a component of the internet, a very large one of that. But I think it's still only going to be. It's not going to be the whole internet. It's only going to comprise a good part that could build a foundation of it, but isn't just everything.
Okay, and I guess Andre, I'll let you have the last word here. The conference coming up, conference on the April 16th. What would you like to offer folks? What are they going to, if they come there, what are they going to learn if they go to this conference?
Well, we have a very exciting program prepared for our audience. We have a number of top academic scholars from the law school. We have Dan Shapiro, who's a world-renowned expert in emotional intelligence from Harvard Law School. We have Michael Wheeler, who's also an expert in negotiations from the Harvard Business School. We also have Divya Narendra, who was the co-founder of ConnectU and a predecessor to Facebook at Harvard College. He was actually one of the originators of the idea. He'll be there as well with Mark Bauer talking about the social media space. And we have a number of different experts that will be able to really provide a power-packed program on this topic.
Okay, and we'll leave it right there. Andre Bisasor, Mark Bale, and good luck on the conference. I'm sure it'll be quite a success.